welcome back to the channel, and thanks for being here. Many times when someone is murdered, they're completely blindsided. It comes out of nowhere. But the woman in today's story knew that one day her violent boyfriend would put an end to her life. But sadly, she stayed with him until that premonition came true. Imogen Bohajczuk was born in 1991, and she was said to be intelligent, kind, caring, ambitious, and full of life. Friends and family lovingly called her Immy for short. Imogen was a beautiful 29-year-old who was born and raised in the village of Mellor, Greater Manchester, UK, and she had one brother. When Imogen was younger, she had gone to school in affluent Alderley Edge. On March 4th, 2021, a housing officer by the name of Flavia, who had recently been helping Imogen get back on her feet, became worried about her when she hadn't heard from her in a few weeks. It actually hadn't been since February 15th that she had talked to Imogen, so she decided to head over to her place and make sure everything was okay. Once she got there, nobody answered the door, but she was able to enter the flat without a key. And when she did, she found Imogen's lifeless, bloodied body lying on top of her bed. She appeared to be covered in bruises of all sizes, and she had multiple stab wounds to her body. Emergency first responders arrived at the scene around 12:15 p.m., where they would pronounce Imogen dead on the scene. Imogen's body had been arranged on the bed, with her arms crossed, her legs crossed at her ankles. She was clutching her favorite bottle of perfume, and a soft stuffed toy had been placed next to her neck. And on her right leg had been painted in nail polish the words, "It was me." Police estimated that Imogen had been dead for nearly 3 weeks at that point, and she would need to be identified by her dental records because the decomposition on her body was so bad. Investigators would determine that Imogen had been killed in her kitchen. Then she had been dragged to her bed where she had been posed. It also looked like someone had made a shoddy attempt to clean up the kitchen where she had been murdered. Detectives also found what they believed to be the murder weapon. It was a bloody knife that had been stuck back inside the knife block on the kitchen counter. Upon an autopsy being performed, a pathologist would find that not only was Imogen's body covered in bruises from her being beaten, but there were also red marks on her neck that suggested that she had been strangled. Additionally, there was a series of ferocious stab wounds to her neck and chest, some so vicious that they had penetrated the bone. One of Imogen's injuries divided her carotid artery. Another separated a full rib bone and struck a lung. A third stab was delivered with such force that it pierced through her sternum, the diaphragm, and her heart into her abdomen. Now, police had a good idea of who their main suspect was at this point. It was Imogen's live-in boyfriend, 41-year-old Daniel Smith. Back in 2019, Imogen had moved into her new flat on Ashton Road in Oldham, and it was meant to be a new start for her. Imogen had previously been in abusive relationships, and she had become estranged from her son. She had also had her own struggles with alcohol. But now she was being helped out by the charity Narco due to her vulnerabilities. Then in 2020, Imogen had met 41-year-old Daniel Smith, and they soon began dating. Not long after that, he would move into her flat with her. So what police wanted to know was where had Daniel been for the last 3 weeks, while his girlfriend lay dead in her bed, decomposing. Investigators set out on a search for Daniel, as he was their #1 suspect. Now, Daniel Smith was a piece of shit. He was violent and manipulative. Daniel had been both verbally and physically abusive towards Imogen during their relationship. On top of that, Daniel had had many relationships in his past where he had been abusive towards women. A woman named Emma had had a relationship with Daniel in the late 90s. She said he was so controlling and abusive towards her that he had actually thrown her down a flight of stairs, as well as threatened her with knives on occasion. The woman had become so distraught at times that she even contemplated taking her own life. When Emma had finally decided that she was going to leave Daniel because he was so toxic, he had lied to her and told her that he had cancer so that she would stay. An attempt that unfortunately worked for quite a while. Another one of Daniel's ex-girlfriends, who was named Samantha, said that Daniel had terrorized her during their relationship. She would end up leaving him because she was convinced that he was going to kill her. Daniel was also an alcoholic. Then in 2015, yet another woman who was dating Daniel at the time reported to police that he had physically assaulted her. She also told police that Daniel's controlling behavior included confiscating her bank cards and humiliating her. She said that he was a very dangerous man, and Daniel and Imogen's relationship had been no different. In fact, back in November of 2020, the housing officer who regularly checked in on Imogen showed up at her house unannounced, and when she did, she saw that Imogen was seriously injured. Imogen would confide in Flavia and tell her that Daniel had actually stabbed her in the thigh. She only agreed to get medical treatment if the police were not involved, because she did not want Daniel to get in trouble. Flavia, however, had to tell her managers of Imogen's situation, and they contacted the police, who visited Imogen's home later that day. It was just one incident in a relationship that had been marked with alcohol abuse and violence. In February of 2021, Imogen reported to police that Daniel had again attacked her, and he had left marks on her wrists and neck. Yet Imogen always remained loyal to Daniel, saying how much she loved him and saying that they were going to get married. This was despite her telling Flavia that he dragged her down. Now, Imogen had remained on friendly terms with her ex-boyfriend, and she would message him regularly when Daniel would get violent towards her and she needed someone to talk to. Dangerously jealous, Daniel had actually gotten in a fight with this man a few weeks before Imogen's body had been found. 3 days after this fight, Imogen sent her ex a text and told him that she continued to be the victim of Daniel's physical abuse, and she thought that he might kill her. Imogen also texted her ex and said, "Get him out of my house." She had also sent her ex a text message in which she told him that Daniel had almost killed her. He strangled her so much. And after he had done that, he grabbed a knife and threatened her with it. The same afternoon that Imogen had sent that text message, she would call police twice. During the second phone call, she told police that she had kicked Daniel out of the house and she was not going to let him back in because he had gripped her neck very hard, leaving marks. Imogen had then messaged her former boyfriend on WhatsApp, sending him pictures of her injuries. The ex-boyfriend told her that she needed to go to police. However, he would never end up hearing back from her again after that. At 5 p.m. the next day, police would end up going to Imogen's flat as a result of her phone calls. But there was no response when they knocked at the front door, so they left. It was only when the housing officer, Flavia, had made a welfare check on Imogen that had got the investigation rolling. After discovering Imogen's body, police also found that her bank cards and mobile phone were still being used. Once he had killed his girlfriend, Daniel tried to cover his tracks by making phone calls from Imogen's phone after he had replaced the SIM card in it. He had also been using her bank card in various places. He had used it to purchase, among other things, gasoline and alcohol for himself. Imogen had received a terrible beating at the hands of the man whom she loved, which had caused bruises on her entire body as she tried to fend off his attack. On March 5th, 24 hours after Imogen's body had been found, Daniel Smith was located at his friend's house, and he was placed under arrest. At the time, he had Imogen's bank card still on him. He had made close to 40 transactions on her debit card and had overdrawn her account by about 400 pounds, or $508 US. In his interview with police, Daniel first tried to claim that Imogen had inflicted the wounds on herself. Typical BS excuse, but it was clear to anyone with eyes that these injuries had been inflicted by another person, and intentionally. Daniel Smith would eventually accept responsibility for Imogen's death, but he wouldn't admit to it until he was cornered with a mountain of evidence against him. Daniel claimed that killing his girlfriend Imogen was out of his character. "Well, I would sure hope so. I hope you haven't killed a whole bunch of other women." He told authorities that he had only drunkenly written on Imogen's leg in nail polish to make it clear that he had been the one that killed her. He claimed that he had not been trying to make a spectacle out of Imogen's body, but he thought that by placing her in a peaceful position, he was doing the right thing. Should have thought about doing the right thing prior to killing her. Daniel, however, claimed that he did not remember why he had even attacked Imogen in the first place, and he said that he didn't even remember the stabbing itself. He did, however, recall placing Imogen on her bed with her favorite perfume and a soft toy next to her. Police would determine that Daniel had first attacked his girlfriend by beating her. He had then stabbed her while they were in the kitchen. From there, he dragged Imogen's body to her bed and posed her. Daniel then took her bank cards and phone and ran off. He would later admit during a session with a psychologist that he had some serious self-esteem issues. Daniel said that he and Imogen would often argue about her former boyfriend, which would always trigger his explosive jealousy. Daniel also said that he believed Imogen was far out of his league and he couldn't stand not being with her. In July of 2021, Daniel Smith pled guilty to Imogen's murder, and he was sentenced at the Manchester Crown Court to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 17 years. During his sentencing hearing, the judge said to Daniel if he wanted to make it clear to police that he had been the one that killed Imogen, he could have just gone to them and told them, rather than writing on her body. The judge said, "This act looks like an act of callous and cruel triumphalism." The judge additionally spoke about Imogen and said, "In killing Imogen, you have deprived a child of a mother, and Imogen's parents and siblings have been deprived of a daughter and a sister. I conclude that you intended to kill Imogen." In a victim impact statement, Imogen's mother, Kim Bohajczuk, said that her daughter had her future ripped away from her at the hands of Daniel. Imogen's mother also told the court about her daughter's plans to rebuild her life with her son and family, and of her everlasting love for her child. Her mother also said, "Her little boy will never know the power of her hugs or giggle uncontrollably after sharing a moment together. They will never share a bedtime story, holidays, trips to see Father Christmas, trips to the zoo, or the magic of Christmas morning. As parents, our instincts are to protect and support our children, but where do you begin to comfort our remaining children through this situation?" Imogen's brother said that he felt uncontrollable sadness, anger, and regret, and said that their lives had had a void that will never be closed. It is so sad that Imogen's son will now never have his mother, even though Imogen was trying to turn her life around. All thanks to Daniel. Daniel, who was a disgusting, awful, vile woman beater. It is so odd how Daniel decided to pose her body as well. I'm not sure what he thought that was going to accomplish.